Listening to Indian officials explain how they plan to cap a surging debt load, it's hard not to be transported back to the Japan of 20 years ago. The basic, and failed, strategy of then-Japanese Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi is precisely the one current Indian Narendra Modi is embracing, growing the economy's way out of debt. How did that ploy work out for Tokyo? Dismally. In 2001, when Koizumi rose to the premiership, Japan's ratio of debt to gross domestic product was 104%. At the time, Koizumi spelled out an ambitious plan to curtail public works spending, the ultimate political boondoggle. Koizumi proposed a roughly 27% cut in wasteful construction aimed more about juicing GDP than improving Japan's already world-class infrastructure over 5 years. Such efforts explain why, to this day, Koizumi stands out as the most important Japanese economic disruptor in decades. With his no reform without sacred cows mantra, Koizumi engineered the privatization of the sprawling Japan Post, which included the world's biggest savings bank with trillions of dollars in assets. It was pork barrel central, where wayward politicians went to fund pet projects in home districts, giant dams, bridges to nowhere, commuter train lines few used, white elephant stadiums and museums, repaving pristine highways everywhere. This obsession with concrete economics to create jobs left Japan with an unsustainable debt load, particularly in the 1990s. After the 1980s bubble economy went awry, Tokyo borrowed and borrowed, and borrowed, to boost GDP. And then Koizumi's reform push went awry. Though Koizumi's team succeeded in prodding banks to dispose of bad loans, his government pivoted back to increased government borrowing. Even Koizumi bought into the canard that a giant economy can grow its way back to fiscal sobriety. So did every one of his predecessors since 2006. That's why today, Japan's debt-to-GDP ratio is about 256%, a more than 146% increase from what Koizumi started with. This leads us back to Modi-era India. Modi's team is, sadly, reading its own press highlighting the likelihood of 9% growth in 2022. Moody's Investors Service, for example, sees India expanding 9.1%. While down from an earlier 9.5% forecast, Moody's analysts still have Modi's economy blowing away China's hopes of growing 5%. That outperformance despite COVID-19, global inflation and supply chain stumbles and Russia-Ukraine uncertainty is clearly going to Modi's head. Last month, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman pledged to spend big to fulfill Modi's grand ambitions. At the same time, India targeted a sharply lower budget deficit of 6.4% of GDP in the fiscal year beginning April 1st. This alone seems fanciful, considering the previous year's 9.3% deficit.